It's time for another edition of Around the Nest, Jay-talking our way through the Toronto Blue Jays minor league organization. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, and over the course of this show, we'll be joined by broadcasters throughout this system. And we begin this week in Triple-A with the voice of the Buffalo Bisons, Ben Wagner. Ben, how does this 4th of July find you?
After a long night of travel to Moosic, Pennsylvania, we are smack dab on top of Montage Mountain, where clearing skies have a beautiful backdrop for Bisons baseball tonight against the Rail Riders.
Let's look back one night. How was your 3rd of July?
Oh, it's pretty awesome. There were a couple of spot showers, though, that may have dampened the spirit of the Bison fans because Buffalo had trailed for the majority of the contest. But 16,505 got their money's worth when it comes to having a fun time at the ballpark. And one of the unique things that we do in Buffalo, and really I have not seen anywhere else across my travels in baseball, the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, I mean, it is a compilation of people that have won Grammys. They perform for the crowd. It is one of the premium tickets that we sell all season long, and they put together a year's worth of music coming together not only with the patriotic themes, but, of course, ties within that given year, maybe landmarks or significant moments, just like a montage last night that was performed by an entire symphony with the orchestra and the chorus all together doing a montage of Michael Jackson music. And, you know, people are standing in the seats and they're moving around with such tributes like that. But then, of course, with the patriotic music and the recognition that the maestro Paul Farrington does, along with a number of choreographed events on the field to recognize not only men and women of our armed services that are in the ballpark with us at that time, but also an on-field recognition of some of the active men and women that are from Western New York as well, as they're recognized for their individual branches. It is really something that is it's something unique to experience once, but even if you do it once, you keep coming back because the program is never the same, and the faces in my 8 years in Buffalo seem to be getting younger and younger, too, as the men and women that are recognized on the field from branches of our military.
Is that your biggest night of the year at Coca-Cola Field?
Well, it's neck and neck, as always, with Star Wars night. There are a couple of now signature events throughout the course of the season where we will draw at capacity, which is just over 18,000. Star Wars night has had unbelievable weather the last 3 seasons, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing and sells out earlier and earlier. The projected forecast leading up to yesterday was somewhat iffy, and it rained between 10 and 2 o'clock across western New York, so I think that definitely had an effect on the walk-up. And then we've got a couple of more events, including Fan Appreciation Night, which always draws well. So we get between 5 and 10 ball games where we're going to have anywhere between 15 and 18,000 people over the course of the year. And then now that the kids are out of school, Buffalo should average, 10,000 plus the rest of the way. So we've got big nights once we get into the summer season, and finally the weather is, even by Western New York terms, broken for warmer weather. So everybody across, has to make sure that they get their staple 1 or 2 Bison games in. And, last night was just another mark on the checklist of people for their summer entertainment.
2 days ago, the International League announced its All-Stars to see who would take on the PCL in the Classic on July 16th at Durham Bulls Athletic Park. The herd will be represented by 3 players, Dan Johnson, Liam Hendricks, and Bobby Korecki. And judging from what they have done this year in each of their own specific ways, talk about deserving. Let's talk about these 3 guys each in turn, and let us begin with Bobby Korecki out of the bullpen, simply because nobody ever begins with the reliever. That's part of the job description. Then, from what you've seen and how Korecki has been this season, the All-Star honor and what it means to him.
Well, for him it means a lot more than I think it will mean to a lot of people, because this year has just been such an unbelievable resurgence in his career. Starts with 17 consecutive scoreless outings with the Bisons, and that's not innings, that's appearances. And actually that whole streak started with a 4-inning relief stint late into a ball game in Rochester. So, you can throw that into it. So it's kind of been a very been an overwhelming season for Bobby Korecki and us as we observe it. But I was really happy, one, that he was elected, not even selected. That's not even the brain trust coming together and saying, all right, we need to round out the roster. The fact that he was elected not only by fans, members of the media, and broadcasters around the league, they recognized how successful this season has been, this first half of the season has been for Bobby Korecki, and the numbers that he's been able to put up. And doing so by not being among the leaders in terms of saves and strikeouts and some of the other just automatic, you go to a stat sheet, you look like, oh, yeah, this guy's numbers are obviously deserving of being an all-star. His overall body of work gets recognized for what he's been able to do, and at times nearly unhittable with his fastball, cutter, and slider combination that he's been able to use. And it's the same combination that's not only made him as dominant here in the International League, but also it's the same combinations that got him 2 opportunities to go back and throw in the big leagues. So really happy for Bobby Korecki. It's not lost on him whatsoever. And he's really thrilled that he gets to take his wife to Durham because it's one of his favorite places to pitch and also cities to visit. And he always tells her about how much fun he has being there for 4 days. So now they're going to get actually an opportunity to experience it together over the 3-day window.
To me, the stat that stands out the most about Dan Johnson is that he has not missed a game for Buffalo. At every single game, he's been there in the middle of the order. Does not matter the weather, does not matter any other factors that enter into play. He's been a consistent for you.
He's been the constant for this lineup, and he's back in there today to play in his 87th consecutive game. And there have been a number of doubleheaders where you thought, well, all right, maybe Dan will take this day off because he DH'd or played first base in the opening game of the Twin Bill. But that hasn't been the case. While that is more impressive, I think in terms of where he has been, he's no young buck anymore either. So he's played a solid first base defensively. He has DH'd, a handful of ball games as well. But to go out there at 34 years of age and never miss a beat, that's saying something for him to stay healthy enough to be in the lineup day in and day out. He's not swinging the bat as well as what he had been at the early part of the season. He did have that walk-off home run over the weekend against Scranton Wilkes-Barre in the 8th inning, breaking a scoreless game. And that was the opener of our Twin Bill as well against one of his former clubs in Scranton. But, so the home run total, the RBI total, obviously that gets a lot of, once again, Dan Johnson's having an all-star caliber season. But what he does for me, too, he's got patient at-bats, and he knows his strike zone. He's disciplined in terms of how he's going to approach an individual pitcher or that situation. And the fact that he walks exceedingly more than anybody else in our league. He's drawn 72 free passes, which is by far and away a runaway in terms of who is the leading walk getter in this league. And that's one of the things that really stick out for me with Dan.
It's the fun thing. I'd love to see him bat up against Liam Hendriks just to see if he could coax a walk out of Liam. I don't think it could happen. He is 7.5 years older than the Australian, and Hendriks simply does not walk anybody.
No, he throws strikes, and maybe that salivates Dan and his opportunity as well because he knows the strike zone, and then he can maybe even be more selective on a pitch to hit if Liam makes somewhat of a slight mistake. And Liam, who gets the ball tonight, is trying to have a bounce-back performance after taking his first loss of the season in Syracuse last time out, but deserving as well. The splits are amazing. He leads the league in whip. He throws a boatload of strikes. He's not afraid of being in the zone to induce contact because Buffalo has played so great defensively all season long with Jonathan Diaz and Ryan Goins and Andy LaRoche and Jared Getter behind him. And as I already talked about, the first base mentality of when Dan Johnson is out there playing on first base as well. So he's never afraid to let guys go out there and try to make contact. If it comes back and it hurts him, he just tips his cap to the opposition that day. But he's been so good, and another guy that, albeit at 25 years of age, had another opportunity with not such great big league success, got a couple of opportunities to pitch in the rotation for Toronto and pitch well that first go-around. Not so well the last time out when he had to make that spot start in Cincinnati, but clearly, it's a bigger body of work, and he's putting together a fine season.
It intrigues me, those players that you see first as an opponent for Buffalo and then as a member of the herd. And so let me ask you, what's the difference between the Liam Hendriks last year of Rochester and the Hendricks this year of the Bisons?
I think it's more of a defined role right now in less terms of fluctuations, because Minnesota, they were struggling last year. Guys were always in flux up and down. While Liam has been up and down this season a little bit, it's only been in small little blips. And whenever he has struggled, I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, it's because he's just not throwing in certain days and routines. When you go 7 or 8 days in between starts, talking to Liam, he wants to throw every fifth day and be on that schedule regardless of what happens. That's his perfect scenario. And he was caught in that a little bit over the last couple of years in Rochester. So knowing how much he likes just the routine and the repetition of his daily workout and approach while trying to get ready for that next start, he approaches it, as always, on every fifth day. So that's what we were treated to earlier in the season, where he was taking the ball every time out and just going out and pounding the strike zone.
Joined by Ben Wagner, the voice of the Triple-A Buffalo Bisons. Then a question sent in via Bluebird Banter, wondering about scouts. And specifically, I quote, have you seen more scouts hanging out to see your team's games now that we are approaching the trade deadline?
I love the questions from Bluebird Banter, because it means people are listening and people are caring about this club. And I welcome them all the time, so this is great. The answer is yes. And 100%. As things heat up into late May, when guys usually have June 1st outs in their contracts, or around the trade deadline, you see a lot of scouts in the seats. But now with the Blue Jays situation, and certain teams are always in the national media spotlight as buyers or sellers, and Alex Anthopoulos continues to get peppered with questions about this as well, where his situation is and who's on the block. Guys are out there hunting, and they're trying to build their lists of players that may be potential targets if they set up a scenario. Well, we may have player A that could help you in this given situation. Now, here are 2 or 3 guys in minor league development that would you be willing to package. So that's why you see so many scouts from a number of different organizations that may be able to build a case so they can take back to their general manager or their farm director and say, all right, now this is going to be a good move for us if we get player A, B, and C. Now, for this certain player that may be an impact player right now for the Blue Jays at the big league level.
Another question, and I guess suppose a follow-up, simply the players in the clubhouse. What do they feel, and do they pay any attention to any trade talks or the attention approaching the deadline?
No, I don't think so, other than the fact that as the trade deadline gets closer and closer, agents may be able to keep them in the loop, and you hear certain things from various guys, but it's not something that they want to waste their time with just because it's totally out of their control. It's much like a major league promotion at this level when a guy is putting together a good run at the plate, or maybe his numbers are stacking up and you can line up the days, or maybe there's a shift in the rotation. Guys don't want to think about that because they want to go out, keep doing what they're doing to put them even in that situation for a potential call-up. So trade deadline, it's even more so out of their control because there are so many variables. If one piece of the puzzle falls away, that may shoot the entire deal down. Or maybe one extra performance is something that a scout or somebody from the front office sees and is able to observe, and that then makes their decision of, wow, this guy is somebody that can help us in the future. Or maybe it's somebody that says, all right, we have maybe another player in terms of development coming through the ranks that could fill this void because we're going to be able to put this guy in a package. This would be the difference maker for us. But all those sorts of scenarios, players don't ever want to hear about it, and you never want to lay it out for them either just because they'll scoff it off.
Our question of the week for Ben Wagner this week revolves around big crowds, and you just had a terrific one yesterday. So, in your recollection, especially recently, what are some of the best crowds you can remember at a baseball game?
Well, I always like playoff baseball because the fans that attend those games at any level are into it, and they're there for the most part to see the result of that game. So they're fans that are dedicated, they're sticking around longer, and not saying that we don't have those fans day in and day out in Buffalo, but when you get 16,000 to 18,000 fans coming to Buffalo, the star of the show is Paul Farrington and the maestro and the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra chorus, and then, of course, about 45 minutes worth of fireworks that are tied in at the end of the night. It's a big commitment, to sit through 3 hours worth of baseball. So big crowds necessarily don't turn into fun crowds, I find, at the minor league level. But playoff crowds are on every pitch. And I've only got to one playoff scenario in my career, and that was in 2006, where about 4,500 people were in New Jersey that night. And you could feel it in the ballpark. And the people going back and forth, pitch by pitch and strike call by strike call. It had a really good feel to it, had a great sound on the radio. And I've seen the same thing replicated on some of the videos and the montages that have been put together from fans in Buffalo, specifically in 2004 and then 2005, where Buffalo had very good ball clubs. And, in 2004, they also won the Governor's Cup championship. But I love big crowds regardless, just because it gives us a great opportunity to have a ballpark full, one, but you get 18,000 people together doing anything at one time. It sounds great, and it can be a lot of fun, and that's what we had last night, from the in-between game promotions with everybody doing the cha-cha slide to one of the favorite things where everybody laughs when we do a celebrity look-alike video feature at the end of some of our ball games on Friday and Saturday night. So all those things to make everybody chuckle, everybody comes together and I think shares in the moment. Those are my favorite kind of crowds.
That constant murmur underneath of the folks chattering, I love that sound.
Oh, it's great. Anytime you can pump in a lot of ballpark audience and just lay out from a broadcast perspective, I think it does a greater service to the overall product for your fans. Ben
Wagner with the Buffalo Bisons. Ben, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Jesse. Enjoy the call.
All right, you got it. Until next week, Ben's going to enjoy some 4th of July action on the road after the Buffalo Bisons hosted the game yesterday. Well, coming up next on Around the Nest, we'll be joined by broadcasters throughout the system, but the Dunedin Blue Jays are in progress right now. Tyler Murray could not attend the show. However, he was able to catch up with Sal Fasano, who is a roaming catcher instructor with the Blue Jays organization throughout the minor leagues. And here's that conversation, Tyler Murray with Sal from earlier this week.
Okay, folks, we're here with Blue Jays roving catching instructor Sal Fasano. Sal, thanks for being here.
No problem, my pleasure.
So we've got 2 new catchers on the roster ever since Derek Chung was promoted and Mike Reeves was reassigned to Lansing. Let's talk about those 2 guys, Santiago Nessie and Jorge Saiz. Let's start with Santiago Nessie. What do you see from him? And he's on the radar, I'd say, in terms of prospect watches. So we'll start with him. What do you think he brings to the table as a catcher in the organization?
Well, the one thing about Santiago, he's still raw, but his toolbox is actually pretty good. He's got a really good arm. He's got good flexibility. He's got good power. Basically, the game right now is at that stage where it's still a little bit fast for him. So hopefully he can learn to slow it down, control his emotions, and just let his ability shine. Where George, on the other hand, was a really good find for us. He was a late-round draft pick. He's played his way into a position where, he's coming to Dunedin. He's catching well. He's taking good at-bats. And George has earned every piece, where Nessie, we're still trying to learn. Okay.
What would you say the biggest jump is for a catcher, maybe more specifically than overall? That jump from Class A to Advanced A, which Nessie and Saiz have done, or maybe from Advanced A to Double-A, which a guy like Derek Chung just had to undergo?
Well, it's funny you say that, because those 2 transitions are probably the 2 toughest, other than the big league transition as a catcher. But once the guys leave the Lansing level, which is low A ball, and they come to high A ball, I start to focus less on the mechanical work and a little bit more on the psychological stuff, how to call a game, how to handle pitching staffs, what to do with the ins and outs. When a guy like Derek, when Derek went, Derek's fundamentals were good. His mechanics were great. I don't have to worry about that. Now it's like, with him, it's even more in-depth, understanding all the plays. Why are these plays in? You're going to call all the pickoffs. You're going to control the running game, and so he understands that aspect of it. So at Double-A, you start to learn the game within the game, but the introduction of it is in high A ball in Dunedin.
So you were up in New Hampshire a couple of days ago helping Derek Chung out with that transition. The hitting looks great, up in the 290s, and we all know how well he can hit. How's he doing, you think, behind home plate at the next level?
The same issues that most people have when they go to a new place. You're shy. You don't know the pitchers. You're afraid to to really use your authority behind the plate, where he's like, well, I don't care. I don't really want him to shake me. I just want to call what he wants to throw. And like, Derek, that's not the way. If you have a thought, you go with it. So it's going back to that pitcher-catcher communication is really the biggest attribute that a catcher can have, but it's the hardest thing to develop, because if they're shy, timid, pitchers don't believe in them, they're going to have issues.
Derek Chung made a very fast transition, I'd say, from infielder to catcher. Were you surprised at how quickly he developed the skill and confidence, and how do you think he did it so quickly?
Well, one thing about Derek, he was a very solid worker, and the first thing I try to tell all the players is at the lower levels, I don't really care how you perform. Well, you know, once you get here to Dunedin, once you get to Double-A, I care how you perform. But the first thing we try to teach all the catchers is work ethic. So if a guy has a good work ethic, I can speed the process up of his development, and that's what Derek had. And so I didn't have to tell him, did you get to the weight room today? Did you do your stretching? He already did it. So you don't have to worry. That's one aspect where you know he's going to be a solid pro, and then we teach him how to be a better player.
Understandably so. We've seen some mound visits lately between Size, Nessie, and the pitchers. They're working with them for, in some cases, the first time. How long, in your experience, Sal, did it take for you to develop enough of a rapport with an individual pitcher, maybe on average, to not necessarily need to go out and talk every once in a while with those signs?
3 starts.
Okay.
So basically about 3 weeks. The first start, I'm going to call and put down whatever he wants to put down, because I'm trying to understand his game, what he's doing it. But I'm asking him questions. Why were you calling that? Why did you want to throw that pitch? The second time, I let him do it about half the time, but I start influencing myself. This is what I was thinking. This is why I think we should have thrown this pitch. By the third start, they start to believe in you, and then you can start to develop a better rapport with them. But it takes 3 starts, at least. We're
talking with Blue Jays roving catching instructor Sal Fasano. Any chance to look at the brand new catcher Max Pentecost, who was just signed yesterday, the first-round draft pick and the 11th overall selection of the Blue Jays, and what were your thoughts?
Well, yes, today was my first day really working with him. Yesterday we just did a little touchy-feel, just trying to understand what his setup looked like, trying to do that stuff. But what we have there is an ultra-athletic catcher. He's super explosive with his lower half. He's got very strong hands, and you guys hear the theory of soft hands as catchers. I don't believe in that. If you have soft hands, you break your fingers. You want hard hands, strong hands. But, where I think we have a very good, maybe even a superior athlete, so now it's my job to refine it into what I think is his big league potential.
What do you think about the current situation in the higher levels in the organization? Deanna Navarro doing a fine job up in Toronto. You got A.J. Jimenez, who everyone's been talking about climbing the ladder. What do you see for the future of the Blue Jays catching situation? Do you think A.J. could be that guy going forward? Is Deanna going to get an extension? Or what do you think is going to be the future for catching in the big leagues? And obviously there's no right answer, but wondering your opinion.
Well, there is no right answer. In a perfect world, you always want your guys up there. You want your guys backing up, so you always have your organization covered. But for the most part, we don't know what's going to happen with Deanna. If we win a World Series, I can see an extension. I can always see that. I mean, he does a good job with the guys. Guys believe in throwing to him. Josh Toley's doing a good job as the backup. Having A.J. there is a nice thing to have, because if something happens to Deanna, you have a guy who's a good defensive catcher that has some offensive threat there. Obviously, in a perfect world, I would love to see all of our guys stay, and I want to see every level covered. And so what I always envision for my catchers are interchangeable parts. I don't really look at him like he's a Double-A catcher. He's a Triple-A catcher. I look at him, if there's a need in the big leagues and they need an everyday guy, I would have no problem sending A.J. there. If the backup gets hurt, I got no problem sending Derek Chung right there right now. So once you start getting that type of stability throughout the whole level, now you've got something to work, because everybody can always fill in the shoes. Everybody can always be replaced.
Looking forward to the future, and obviously, Sal, you're a big part of it, so great to have you here with us, and great to have you in the organization. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It was Tyler Murray of the Dunedin Blue Jays catching up with Sal Fasano, who oversees and instructs and mentors and does so much else with all of the catching prospects within the Toronto Blue Jays organization. This is Around the Nest. We'd love to speak with all the radio broadcasters throughout the system. Not only that, I'd love to give you those insights, whether with the prospects, with interviews, with the young players coming up, or with the instructors, with the rovers, with the coaches, etc. So we spoke with Ben Wagner from AAA Buffalo to start things off. You heard from Tyler. And the reason that we could not hear from Tyler live, well, the Dunedin Blue Jays are in progress right now. They're playing an early game today on Independence Day. The Blue Jays in the FSL, the A-Advanced Florida State League, and they're currently tied up 1-1. That game is off to the fourth inning, and Frank Viola III is on the mound in his A-Advanced debut. Got to see Frank Viola pitching for the Lansing Lugnuts in the Midwest League. And so far, A-Advanced doing just fine. 4 innings, 1 run allowed. He's walked 4, he struck out nobody. He's a 30-year-old knuckleballer and a fascinating story. Going to be very interesting to see how Frank performs as he moves on up the ladder, but already progressing from Lansing up to Dunedin. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Class Single-A Lansing Lugnuts. Let's look over some questions sent in via Bluebird Banter, part of the SB Nation. For example, a question, after signing draft picks, what kind of process goes into which minor league affiliate they join? You can tell after the draft picks are signed, they head on off to Dunedin, to the Blue Jays minor league camp, the Maddox Center, and then, based upon their progress there, maybe they start off in the Gulf Coast League. Maybe they get sent directly to whether it's Bluefield or Vancouver. The Blue Jays have tons of folks having a look, see how they perform. There's, for example, a question of an LB Dantzler who plays 1 game in the Gulf Coast League and then jumps up to Vancouver. There are other players. Last year, the Lansing Lugnuts received directly Kendall Graveman, Matt Boyd, and Chad Gerardo. They were drafted out of college, Boyd from Oregon State, Gerardo and Graveman out of Mississippi State, and they were assigned directly to Lansing, Single-A, skipping the GCL, skipping Bluefield, and skipping Vancouver. So the Blue Jays have a look, and they see, and they assign those players to where they think, the level that they think those players are ready for. Other questions. Jeremy Gaboryski, it looks like he's been solid until his latest start. What happened there? And overall, how has he been? Jeremy Gaboryski has been an ace on this Lugnut staff. Right from the very start of the season, he has not missed the start. He has tied atop the lead in the Midwest League in starts. He leads the league in innings pitched. He also leads the league in batters faced and base hits allowed. I believe he's up there in sacrifice flies too. But a more pressing category, fewest walks per 9 innings. That ratio has been tremendous because just like Liam Hendricks at the AAA level, Gaboryski has been strong. Jeremy Gaboryski rarely walks the batter. Now let me bring in Trey Wilson, who assists me with the Lansing Lugnuts. You can hear us calling the Lugnuts games all season long via the TuneIn radio app and LansingLugnuts.com. And Trey, your impressions of Jeremy Gaboryski this season and what happened with him yesterday?
Yesterday was kind of one of those days where some softly hit balls find their way through, and then from there everything just kind of collapses. He didn't get hit too hard for the most part yesterday, no more than I would say a normal day, but Gaboryski's been great at eating up innings this year, 1, 2, not walking anybody, and 3, keeping runs off the board. He's won his last 6 consecutive decisions. After getting the no decision last night, that streak is still alive. The problem with Gaboryski is that hitters have been getting a lot of hits against him. He's been giving up. There have been games where you have 7, 8, 9 hits in 5 or 6 innings, and eventually that's going to catch back up with you, and it did last night. Gave up 12 hits, that was a career high. Gave up 7 runs, that was a career high. It was kind of a culmination of, yeah, he's been skating by. Now, don't get me wrong, Jeremy has done a great job this year, but it's not like he has been lights out. He's kind of just been coming in and handling business and surviving. And that's worked out very well, but it's not going to work out over the course of the whole season. You're going to have nights like you had last night. Thankfully for him, the offense picked him up and ended up squeaking out that 9 to 8 wins.
Joined by Trey Wilson of the Lansing Lugnuts on Around the Nest. A question sent in via Bluebird Banter about scouts. And I asked already AAA Ben Wagner about this. Have you seen more scouts hanging out to watch the Lugnuts games now that the trade deadline is approaching?
I think that's the case really every season. This is my 4th season around the Blue Jays organization, and really that time culminates with most of the time that Alex Anthopoulos has been with the Blue Jays. So it's typically known that Anthopoulos is willing to move prospects, and every single year, the last 3 years in Bluefield, it was just jam-packed with scouts leading up to the trade deadline, especially once July started. And we've seen that has been the case so far. I think we've seen I wouldn't say more. We've seen a few more of late, but it's been hit or miss. There have been times throughout other parts of this season where we've seen a lot of scouts around too. So it's not even really that it's elevated with the trade deadline coming up. There have been a lot really over the course of the season. We've seen a few spurts here and there where we've had a ton of scouts sitting down in the seats behind home plate. And I guess we'll see tonight. I'll take a closer look tonight, but there have been a lot really over the course of the entire season. So the influx of late is just kind of following a trend that we've seen this year.
A question that was attached on to that one, maybe piggybacking off of that, does it affect the players? What do the players think about the trade deadline and any trade talks that swirl?
I would say 99% of the time they don't pay any attention to it. Very few guys think about it. There are some guys that there's nobody specific that comes to mind, but I've heard over the years there's some guys that want to be moved. And it's not that they have a problem with the organization that they're in. I'm not saying this is anybody in the Blue Jays organization either, but sometimes guys hope to get traded because with other organizations there could be less resistance on that path to the major leagues. The minor league system for the Blue Jays is pretty bottlenecked, especially for certain positions. So there are some guys that may, in the back of their mind, be thinking, you know what, I wouldn't mind if I got moved and shortened up that road to the majors. But I would say, aside from maybe a couple of guys that kind of think outside the box from other players anyway, nobody's really thinking about it. Nobody really has it on their mind. I don't know if you have observed anything contrary to what I've just said.
No, I agree. I agree with every word that you've said. I think that's absolutely correct. And with the players, all they know is to keep on putting in, day out effort, especially as the season goes on, get better. But, hey, if there's a scout writing up a positive report on them, that's fine, but it's something that they really should not dwell on.
I don't think they ever even notice an influx of scouts in the stands, aside from maybe some of the guys who are charting. They might, because they're usually seated in around the same area, they might notice, but you never hear any player mention anything about a scout or say, hey, what are the scouts saying? I think if any of the players really cared, most of them would have enough comfort level with you or me or any other media person or broadcaster to come up and say, hey, so what the scouts been saying? And I can only think of one person who's ever asked me that over the course of the last few years.
I don't think I've ever been asked. Let me tell you, a position that scouts generally don't notice too much about or don't devote too much time to writing too much about, the position of the relief pitcher. And yet, Trey, I put it to you, where would the Lugnuts be without Brady Dragmeyer and Griffin Murphy?
Those two have been phenomenal this year, especially Murphy, consistently over the course of this season, still leading the league in saves. He's got 16 saves this year in 18 attempts, and he's been just about lights out. There have been nights like last night where he'll give up a run, but he has that cushion to work with, so he's had some luck fall his way in that category. But really, he has set himself up nicely to be quite the closer. He mixes up his pitches so well. You'll see him drop in the changeup or the hook, or they'll bring in the fastball, and you never know which is coming. His pitch sequences are a complete mystery. And you and I saw last night, maybe he was showing off a little bit. He was firing in the fastball in the mid-90s. We've seen that from him here and there last season, but we saw at least 94 miles an hour out of Murphy last night. It's almost like he has outgrown the competition of this league. I would not be surprised to see him promoted soon and taking on a higher level of competition, but also even actually talking with him not long before I came on here, and it wasn't that it came up in conversation, the idea of a promotion, but he just made a comment that was along the lines of, you know what, I'm here. I want to win a title. If I'm going to be here this year, let me stick it out. I'll win a title. So you never know. I mean, every player wants a promotion, but every player is going out there competing every day too. So he's in a position where he has just been absolutely phenomenal here. And Brady Dragmeyer, he has now pitched 15 consecutive scoreless innings after his outing last night, and we saw that from him out of the beginning of the season, where he'd go out and he was almost perfect, and then he went through a stretch where he gave up some runs here and there and ran into some trouble. And now he's right back to where he's been just about unhittable. His ERA this year is down to 2.39. as I mentioned a second ago, 15 straight scoreless innings. Him and Phil Kish as well. Phil Kish is right there. Those guys in the back of the bullpen, and now even Roberto Espinoza. So I know maybe not a lot of people are keeping an eye on as close as the first two guys that we talked about, but he's been just about lights out this month too. Those four in the back of the bullpen have been almost perfect.
For the Lansing Lugnuts, this is Trey Wilson. Trey and I broadcast the Lugnuts games. We've seen the Lugnuts get off to a nice start here in the second half. They're now 8-6. The bullpen's been part of the key. Who have been keys offensively?
Oh, wow. Everybody has been contributing offensively lately. I think we'll start with David Harris. He's been the surprise. He has really come out hitting the ball well since he joined this team. The last series didn't go all that great for him at the plate, but he still found ways to get on and contribute. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot more power than I think I expected and maybe even you expected. Matt Dean just keeps on hitting. He's 10th in the league right now. He's the only Lugnuts player, everyday player, I should say, that has an average over 300. And he hit a moonshot of a home run last night. He's got extremely good power whenever he decides to let it out into all fields. He can take balls out of some of these ballparks the other way, too. So that's been good to see. DJ Davis, 6-game hitting streak right now. 7 hits in the Great Lakes series. He had a 2-for-4 night last night against West Michigan. He's been slowly putting it together, but he seems to have found one of those good grooves right now. He had a home run when we were at Great Lakes last week, and he's been a lot better of late than he had been throughout most of this year. So hopefully we can see him continue this trajectory through the second half. The strikeout numbers for him are way down. He's working walks, which we haven't said. I'm not going to say working walks like he's doing it a lot, but the fact that it's happened at all lately is an improvement over where it had been. And he's not getting caught stealing bases. He's stolen a couple of them in a row, and he's not taking off as much. So for a while, he'd get on base, boom, immediately running, and more times than not, he was getting thrown out. So he's being a little bit more selective with his base stealing right now, trying to figure out that aspect of his game. You can't not throw in guys like Dickie Jothon and Mitch Ney and Derek Lovelace, who have also been back to warming up from the plate of late.
Don't want to take them for granted, right? You know what Mitch Ney and Derek Lovelace and Dickie Jothon are giving the team at the moment. Ney and Thon, co-players in the month for June, Lovelace the All-Star, and they've begun the second half the way that they ended the first half.
Yes, we saw Mitch Ney last night hit a ball a long way, and it just goes as a foul ball in the scorebook. I'm still not convinced that the ball was foul. Neither was Mitch after the game, but people always ask, going back even to last year, people have asked, where's the power for Ney that everybody expected to see? It's there. He's still just working on other things hitting, but when he unleashes it, boy, it's fun to watch.
Let's devote a little bit of time, at least, to Anthony Alford. A question from Bluebird Banter about Anthony. I've heard from a lot of folks on Twitter. What do we think of Anthony? We've had the chance to see him for 2 games here after he spent his first 2 professional seasons in the Gulf Coast League, and then he played 9 games in Bluefield. It's a very limited sample size, and yet, your impressions.
Well, last night from him was great. That was the first full game that we've seen him. He had a couple of hits. He drove in a run. The athletic talent is obviously there. His speed and his athleticism are almost unparalleled to what we've seen, at least in such a small sample. The baseball instincts are very good. I think for him being a 2-sport guy, he looks extremely comfortable in a baseball field considering how few games he's played in his professional career. If you're sitting in the stands watching and you've never heard of this guy, you wouldn't expect to say, oh, this guy just got bumped up from rookie league and he's only played in a handful of professional games, period, and he's only 19 years old. I think there are a lot of good things to look forward to with Anthony Alford once he decides to devote himself, should he decide to devote himself exclusively to baseball at some point down the road. Obviously, that's not going to happen right now, but there's a lot of talent there. You can see why the Blue Jays are so high on him and continue to stick with him, knowing that they're going to have to share time with college football. He's last night, seeing him come through the way he did last night is even more. It's even better to see, because when I was downstairs not too long ago this afternoon, he was doing an interview, and he was talking about how that's the biggest crowd in baseball that he's ever played in front of. And he said he had some nerves, maybe a little bit, but he came through and had a great game, playing in front of about 10,000 last night at West Michigan. Now, granted, he's playing college football. He's playing in front of some pretty sizable crowds. But baseball is a little bit different. Football, it's easier to drown out that crowd noise and make everything else, you're so focused on the game. Baseball, it's a little bit harder because you have so much downtime between plays, and you realize that crowd is around you when you're on a baseball field, more so than in football. So he tuned it out last night, and he had a great game.
Tonight, we have heard that the Lansing Lugnuts have all of the seats sold out. We have heard that it's down to lone seating. I wonder what he's going to think about tonight's crowd. But yet, back-to-back, here are the biggest baseball crowds that he's ever seen. And I agree with you that baseball crowds and football crowds, especially when you've got your helmet on, your adrenaline's pumping, you might not notice it. Baseball allows you the opportunity to look around and go, whoa, there are a lot of people here.
Yeah, for sure. And I gave you a little segue into our question of the day if you want to bring that on.
Let's do it. Our question of the day for Trey Wilson, the best baseball crowds you can remember.
Well, from Major League standpoint, being able to go to Tigers games up here, it's been pretty cool when we have off days. Obviously, they're one of the best teams in baseball right now. So, of course, they're going to have big crowds turn out and enthusiastic crowds. The night that they played the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball a couple of weeks ago, that was a fantastic crowd atmosphere until David Ortiz hit his home run at the top of the ninth to put the Red Sox up, and then it kind of died off. But as far as regular season big league game, that's probably the best that I've seen. I haven't been to some of the places like San Francisco or Chicago or Boston or New York for games that always produce great crowds. I went to a playoff game in Atlanta last year against the Dodgers, and obviously a playoff game is going to have an unreal atmosphere, and it did there. But for minor league baseball, Bluefield, of course, I have a little bit of a bias there, but games where Bluefield plays Princeton, it's an incredible atmosphere down there. That's a rivalry that for the high school football games between those two schools, they'll draw more than 10 or 12,000, considering the size of those towns. That's pretty impressive. And that rivalry translates right over to the Mercer Cup every year between Bluefield and Princeton. Princeton last year, the crowds weren't quite as good, but when they were at Bowen Field playing, that place was packed. It was loud. Any 4th of July game in baseball always has a great crowd. I've been to some in places like Norfolk, back home, where the Orioles AAA team is. We'll see one here tonight. Different places where I saw them throughout the Appalachian League. I think the 4th of July crowds are always going to be the best in minor league baseball, pretty much consistently. You're going to have, it's what you do in towns that have minor league teams. It's the spot to be. So those are obviously going to be some of the best.
Trey Wilson with the Lansing Lugnuts. Find him on Twitter at TreyWilson757. Trey, thank you, and we'll check in again with you next Friday.
Thank you, Jesse.
From Trey Wilson, and he was just talking about the Mercer Cup, Appalachian League baseball, and how it is when Bluefield plays Princeton. Let me bring in Kevin Fitzgerald, the voice of the Bluefield Blue Jays. And Kevin, how has that Mercer Cup experience begun for you?
Hey, it got off to a pretty good start a couple of days ago against Princeton, like Trey was mentioning. It was a back-and-forth game. It really was like a boxing match. The first game between the Rays and the Blue Jays, and Bluefield came out with a 13-9 victory, and actually Gabriel Senya, a catcher at third baseman for Bluefield, he actually hit a 3-run bomb that was the difference maker in a game where it was just back and forth. So you could tell that these guys came out a little extra juiced, and that was the one thing that manager Dennis Holmberg said was they just came off a sweep at the hands of the Danville Braves, another team in this league, and then he just said, listen, you guys better be ready and prepared for this cup and for this series, because the fan bases take it seriously, and you could tell there was just an extra edge the next day because those guys scored a season-high 13 runs, and the excitement was there. The energy in the building was there at Bowen Field that I don't think we had seen yet. So it was great to be a part of it, and got a glimpse of the new trophy this year. It's a nice one. It's a pretty-looking trophy.
It's so strange to me. I'm looking at your schedule, and it was a one-game series, Bluefield and Princeton, a Tuesday game in the midst of two other series with a day off afterward. It's remarkable.
I think it's like the appetizer, I guess, to the whole entree. And I don't think the people, the guys who put the schedule together and both teams and fan bases could have asked for a better start to it. It's almost like, geez, a one-game series, and that was what we get, a 15-9 back-and-forth game that features a 7-run inning, multiple lead changes. I guess it'll have people clamoring for more, maybe even regardless of what the outcome was. But, yeah, those guys, they just had a day off a couple days ago. It was necessary, and this league, you play 68 games, as you guys know, and you only have 4 off days. So, it's always good to get those 24 hours off. These guys came back and just had a shutout the Elizabethton Twins 2-0 yesterday. Great pitching, 2-run home run off the bat of Queens native Josh Almonte, and that was all she wrote. So it was a good day off. These guys look a little re-energized. Just driving around the bus with them, there's a little extra pep in the step. You can see it. So I think they needed that off day. But you're right, a little kooky schedule-wise. But just going back to the Mercer Cup, I think it's almost like an appetizer to the main course because they'll play another 4-game series, another 3-game series, and then, of course, one more 3-game series, and you play 11 games against your rival in the league.
That's awesome. Joined by Kevin Fitzgerald of the Bluefield Blue Jays, we received a question from Bluebird Banter wondering about Ryan Barucki. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to his stuff and how he has looked so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen Ryan a couple times at this point in the year. He pitched a few days ago against Danville. That was his. That was really like his first start. He came in and pitched a few innings earlier in the year. That was his 3rd appearance. So this was kind of the first big test for him against Danville a few days ago on the 30th. That was against a hot Danville offense. I mean, they're the best offense in the league, and he only gave up 3 hits in his 3 2/3 innings of work. He was on a pitch count limit. He was only going to throw about 65, 75 or so against Danville 4 days ago. And you know what? He cruised through the first couple innings and just ran into a little speed bump, and that really is just 1 to 9 in the order. Thank you. Of the Danville Braves, and he gave up 3 runs. You can see, you see, and you look at his ERA. That game was 7.36. That does not speak to what he's capable of. Those are the first 3 runs that he gave up all year. I mean, he's just so confident when you talk to him on and off the field. He's not a quirky pitcher. He doesn't need to be siphoned off from everybody. He loves to chat. He gets along with every one of his teammates. He's just full of energy, and I think he carries that out onto the pitcher's mound as well, because he works fast. I like it. He almost looks like Andy Pettit out there. He's just got a scowl on his face. He's got that glove up over his face. He's just going to come right at you. And he's got a very good breaking pitch, very good. That he's really developed. The curveball, slider, and that fastball's got some gas behind it. And he's probably he's going to hit 94. When he's at his best, and he's going to keep it above 92. So he has the one thing I like about him is that he just comes right at you with his fastball. He's not going to mess around. He's going to challenge hitters. And you know what? Against Danville, a couple hits went against him. He challenged a few hitters, and you know what? That's going to happen. But that's a big left-hander that you want to keep an eye on in this organization, because he's just got a great head on his shoulders, always positive. And when he comes out after the game, he's not going to be too down on himself. He's just going to put the game behind him, and he's going to get ready for his next start, which you'll see in a couple days. He'll start game 1 of Bluefield's next series when they get back to Bowen on Sunday.
Let's go through some superlatives with the Bluefield pitching core. Who throws the hardest?
There are a couple guys that win that award. I got a couple players that were down in the GCL and the Dominican Summer League the last couple of years. Alberto Guzman, he's a Dominican Republic native. Jesus Tenuco is another guy can throw hard. Those 2 guys, I think, probably win the award for the scariest fastball. Tinoco is a big 6'3" guy. This is his first year, really playing, as Dennis Holmberg likes to say, under the lights, and you're playing in front of fans, you're on the bus, and you're doing the whole minor league experience. He could hit 97, and he's done a lot in extended spring training. I don't think he's quite got it up to 97 just yet, but he is, he's got that in his back pocket, I guess you could say. Alberto Guzman throws some serious smoke. And then you just brought up the name Barucki. He can get, he's probably number 3 on that list. He can get it up there easily. So those guys, if we're going to give out the award for the best heater, they would be they'd be on the podium 1, 2, and 3.
All right. So how about best secondary stuff? Best changeup or breaking ball?
Yeah, I think here's a name I want to throw out there that's a little underrated. I think on a previous show you brought up the name Matt Morale, who actually starts tonight for Bluefield. He's just got a terrific slider. But I think here's somebody that you probably won't know too much about. Just went 5 innings, gave up a couple hits, just 2 hits in his first start of the year, actually against Princeton, that Rays game I mentioned. His name's Joey Aquino. He mixes his pitches very well, and his breaking stuff is good. And I think what makes it even better is that, he's not gonna throw multiple fastballs at you. He's gonna change speeds constantly. I think that's his best friend. He's a Hawaii native, good right-hander, solid build. He's pitched in 11 innings this year, and he's only given up 4 earned runs. And again, had a great debut starting on the mound a few days ago. But he's kind of got an underrated pitch, and kind of like the underdog pitch that he uses is a splitter, and he likes to throw that when he's out in front of the count. So he's someone to keep an eye on, because he just mixes his pitches and just mixes speed so well. Miguel Burgos, I want to throw his name out there as well. He just went 5 shutout innings last night against the Twins. I mean, he's a good little left-hander, and just a very, very solid pitcher on the mound. So those guys have got some good breaking pitches, that you'd have to watch out for. And Michael Kraft as well. He is a left-hander from University of Texas, San Antonio, has yet to yield a run this year. I think those guys have got some great breaking pitches, and they're good with it because they mix with the speeds very well.
Let's turn our attention to the position players. Who is the fastest player on Bluefield?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, and I think one of them is actually in your lineup today, or has been in the last couple of days. Anthony Alford down in Bluefield. He can fly, can he? He was a fast player. He patrols center field like a major leaguer out there, and he's up in Lansing, and they got a shortstop who runs very well. Bluefield does, and Richard Arena. He can really fly around the base paths. I think if I had to take it away from Anthony Alford, how about this? The very scary speed that you wouldn't maybe have guessed because of his size. Bluefield's new center fielder with Alford out of the lineup. Josh Almonte, I mentioned his name earlier. This is his 3rd year in minor league ball. He's absolutely he's just crushing the baseball. Just hot shot after hot shot. But he plays a really good center field, and he's about 6'3". He's got long legs, and he's almost like a deer out there. He can, you wouldn't expect it, but he can really run. And I think he's just going to play as well defensively as Alford did out in center field. The Blue Jays don't lose anything defensively with him and offensively with Almonte out there, but he's run down some balls that you wouldn't have thought he could get to in center. He's got some secret wheels, up the middle.
Something that I don't think any of us should be surprised by, simply because of the inexperience of the players. Bluefield is committing an awful lot of errors this year. It happens especially in the early going. But are there any players, and you started to answer it right there, so that helps to answer the question, who, okay, they are committing a lot of errors, but their range is outstanding, and they have an outstanding arm. And so simply, the more game experience they get, the better they're going to be defensively.
Right. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. It's early. And here's the thing, you'll know from just talking with Trey Wilson, your broadcast partner, and he'll be the first to tell you that you've got probably about 10, 15 guys that played for Bluefield last year that have moved up to Single-A. So, the team coming in this year almost entirely made up of guys mixed in with draft picks that played in the GCL last year. And it really is, just talking with a few of these coaches and coaches around the league and guys that have worked with the Blue Jays in different minor league organizations, you learn that rookie ball in the Gulf Coast League as opposed to rookie ball in the Appalachian League is much different. I've heard it likened to it's almost like, you get up, it's like Groundhog Day. You get up and do the same thing over and over again. There's not a lot of deviation in the GCL. You get up, the alarm clock rings. You're playing in, you're playing in the day. You're not really playing under the lights. It's against the same squads. You don't travel around. You're not on the bus. You don't really experience that fatigue of the travel, the mental side of it. So it is a little bit of an adjustment, and then it sometimes shows itself when you're out on the field. But you're right; these guys they're starting to come around, and it's just been I think the last week has been the best week of baseball for this team, and I'm sure the next week and the next week and the following ones will follow that lineage. But there's been some errors, but they've tailored a little bit. They've turned down. They've definitely decreased that number as of late. I think it is because you just have to get adjusted to your first glimpse of real minor league ball as opposed to the Gulf Coast League down in Florida. I think that's the biggest adjustment is kind of the realty of it.
Something that you were close to that fascinates me because I want to get things right. The pronunciations for last names. I'm just looking down. I think you said Matt Smorell, right?
Yes, Morale. Yes, you just rhyme it right to morale, but not Smorel as some people would think. But yeah, he's Matt Smorell.
And then Richard pronounces his last name how?
Yeah, if you wanted, I guess you can do the Latin pronunciation of it, but the way he says it is Orenya, with almost like a tilde over the N, and then you put a little emphasis on the R as well, Orenya. That's how it comes off the tongue.
There are certain players. Gustavo Pierre showed up in Lansing, and it was his second year before I finally started to get it. And I still know that I'm not quite right, but he arrived in Lansing, and everyone called him Gus Pierre. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty important to figure out how does a guy pronounce his last name, and let's get it
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
Our question of the week for Kevin Fitzgerald is this. What is the biggest crowd you've ever been a part of or you can recollect with regarding a baseball game? The best crowd.
Yeah. I was glad you brought that question up when we were, looking at just the rundown of what we were going to talk about this week. And I was thinking about it, on the bus ride over to the field. And I'd have to say I went to a, surprise. I don't know if anybody has used this part, but a Yankee game maybe about, I guess at this point it'd be about 6 years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, because it was the last, one of the last years. I think it was actually the last year of the old Yankee Stadium. And you know what? It was my first ever experience going to a Yankee, being at Yankee Stadium, and it was just a Friday. It was a Friday night game. I think they were playing the Rays, and now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was the year the Rays went to the World Series. So I think it was, when it was a good game, just matchup wise. And it was late in the year. I think it was September, and the place was packed. It was a Friday night. You could just feel a buzz, not just a roar or how loud it is, but you could just feel the buzz of energy in a place that I don't think I had ever really experienced before. And then you go to Yankee Stadium and the place is jammed. That was when Yankee fans showed up. I dig on Yankee fans, but that was at the old stadium, and there was a buzz at the place that it was just unmatched and something I'd never been a part of before. And I think it was because it was the last year of the old stadium. It was it was getting down to the wire. They're playing a great team, and you're sitting around people. You're just talking to Yankee fans. You don't know, and it really was. That was probably the best crowd I'd ever been a part of. Late, maybe it was a Labor Day weekend, Friday night game. It was as I'm kind of the wheels are spinning. I'm thinking back to it, but that was probably the best environment, the best baseball game I've been a part of. No doubt. That was really cool. First experience at Yankee.
You can find Kevin Fitzgerald on Twitter, Kevin T. Fitz. The Bluefield Blue Jays back in action today. Kevin, best of luck. Have some fun, and thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. I'll see you next week, Jesse. Thank you.
Until next week. We're wrapping up another edition of Around the Nest. I thank you very much for your support. We're now putting the Around the Nests on YouTube. So simply go to YouTube. You can search Around the Nest. They're also up on SoundCloud, all of the Around the Nest from 2013 all the way up through this week. The very second that it ends, I'll get everything uploaded. So thank you very much. My thanks to Kevin Fitzgerald with Bluefield, Trey Wilson with Lansing, Tyler Murray, and Sal Fasano. Tyler from Dunedin, Ben Wagner with the Triple-A Buffalo Bisons. New Hampshire dealing with rain difficulties, lots of chaos going on in New Hampshire. Dunedin playing ball right now, Vancouver busy. We'll check in with everyone again next week on Around the Nest. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, and have an enjoyable weekend, and happy Independence Day. And happy also belated Canada Day, I should add in too.